Why would a government that has your best interests at heart pass legislation, bill after bill after bill, that actually hurts the citizens? And if they're consciously trying to hurt us, and they're showing it to hurt Albertans and hurt Canadians, why are we still supporting these people?
Does the APP have any sort of hope that it can be reconciled under the existing Federation of Canada, like Alberta can get a better deal like Danielle Smith? So it's no. It is pure path to independence. We're done. We don't believe you anymore. The time has come.
We don't believe them at all anymore.
Danielle Smith has been made to look like a complete fool by Mark Carney. So 6 months ago, she said, look, here are the 9 bad laws that I want them to change. We want to end equalization. We want to stop this. We want to stop that, blah, blah, blah. What has come off of that list? Not one single thing.
Can you let me know right now, though, just to give a quick update, where are we at with the move towards independence? Well, citizens, welcome to the show today. Hope you guys are doing well wherever you may be watching us from. If you're on YouTube, give us a hello. Remember, like the thumbs up. Let us know where you're watching from. We've got a couple guys that have a lot to say today. We're going to be talking through Alberta independence. We're going to be talking through the path, what's taking place. I know if you're like me, you probably have a lot of questions about what's taking place, where are we at, is the momentum growing, is it shrinking, what's the outreach been, what's happening with the UCP, what's been happening with the U.S. side of things, and President Trump and his teasing of Canada becoming a 51st state. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on depending who you've been listening to. If you're following along and you know Jeremy and I, as we have these podcasts we talk through, we're genuinely curious and wanting to find, hey, what is the truth on the ground? What are both sides saying? What does it look like so that we can all be informed? Because, our role as citizens is to be informed so that we can actually move ahead with our duties that we have. But I'm going to digress on that point. Welcome to the show, you guys. Mitch and Jeff, how are you guys?
Cool. How are you?
Yeah, really happy to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Just to let our audience know about who you guys are. Mitch is CEO of the APP, which is the Alberta Prosperity Project, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would probably guess is the leaders of the maybe the unofficial leaders, however you want to throw it, of the independence movement. You guys are most clearly the ones that are at the forefront of it, who've had a lot of negotiations and moving it forward. You want to add on that?
Well, I think we're the people that are going to be able to make this happen. That if we're going to have a referendum for independence, it's going to be the Alberta Prosperity Project that's going to move it forward. So we have 250,000 pledges from people. So if the Citizens Initiative Act asked for 177,000 signatures, well, we have 250,000 people that have already committed to signing that document. So the minute that becomes, we get through our court case, then we actually can collect our signatures and force a referendum for independence.
Okay. And Jeff Rath, we got co-founder of the APP, from what I believe, constitutional lawyer, counsel as well regarding the APP. Anything else you want to add to that?
Well, just the APP moving forward. I mean, we're a nonpartisan organization. So the key there is that it doesn't matter, whether you belong to one of the many, Alberta independence parties, whether you belong to the UCP, whether you belong to the NDP, whatever it is. Everybody in Alberta has an interest in prosperity for their children and their grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're telling everybody. It doesn't matter what party you've supported in the past. Independence is a matter of survival for Albertans, right? And that's what people need to keep in mind. I mean, you want to get rid of federal income tax. You want to get rid of federal taxes. You want to get rid of, the federal government destroying our industries, making it so that nobody wants to invest in Alberta anymore, because who can put money into any project in Alberta without knowing what the idiots in Ottawa are going to do next to make their project non-viable from an economic perspective? We have to get out from underneath underneath Ottawa if we're going to prosper and move forward as a country, and that's what we need to do. Okay.
So just so you guys know, as you're listening, I've talked to you guys as well back in the green room beforehand. I am coming at this, just so everyone knows my position, I'm coming at this from a perspective of, I think Alberta has clearly been getting a raw deal. Jeremy and I this is our Iceberg and our Titanic, just so you guys know. We play around with the proverbial Titanic and Iceberg. Where's Canada at on course? And we're not happy with, you just look at the data of Canada's economy, you look at immigration, you look at issues that we have, per capita output, investment, you look at new business startups. Like the data is there to show we are in decline as Canada. Alberta, you can call it, is the province that has got the most potential for growth, the economic backbone, if you want to say, for Alberta. There's obviously other parts that are very big, but it's a major part, third largest natural resources in the world in Alberta. there's a lot of potential in Alberta. Alberta, in our opinion, has been stifled currently by federal government. You look at Bill C-69 and other issues like that. So I get Alberta needs a new deal, not just a new deal. Alberta needs to explore what its options are, as you're saying, for its best path forward. I'm trying to get down to help myself understand, am I on the side of, 100% for independence, or is it still viable or possible to figure out a new deal within the current system? And so that's where I'm coming from.
So do you want me to start with that? Okay, so here's the way I see this. I see Alberta's in the Titanic and Canada is the iceberg. So this is what's happening to us. They're doing everything they can to take our rights and freedoms away from us. I mean, C2, C8, C9, all these things that are coming down the pipe, all of the legislation that's been passed through the Liberal government for the last 10 years has actually designed to make our people poorer. It's not only designed to make our people poorer, it's actually accomplishing it. They've grown 1.5% GDP in the last 10 years.
Canadians?
Canadians. Well, I'm a Canadian, first of all. And the way I see this is we have a government that's planning our demise. And it's very hard to disregard the fact that our GDP has grown 1.5% in 10 years. Mm-hmm. How is that possible? Unless you do it on purpose, unless you're consciously doing it. There's no way with what we have in this country that places like Ireland, whose GDP have grown like 40% in the same amount of time, and they're 30 times better than us. Mm-hmm. So the federal government with their green initiatives, with all the things that they're doing, C-39, we allowed them to lie to our people. So they passed Bill C-39 in 2019. All of a sudden, everything that comes out of the media could be a lie. And it's legal. So as an old person, I grew up my whole life, what came through the media was the truth. And so if you lied in the media and you didn't have sources to back it up, you could actually go to jail. Yeah. So that was a problem. That is no longer the case. So what is the purpose of that? That's the ring that controls all the rings. If you can lie to the people, which they're doing constantly, and you can steal from the people, which they're doing constantly and now, and there's nobody in any of the rooms that we talk to that don't believe that the federal government is actually stealing from us. So the whole purpose of what they're doing is to make themselves richer and us poorer, and it's very clearly being done. Like, we can go step by step by step and show you how it's actually happening. Uncontrolled immigration, hyperinflation, all the unemployment that's out there. All this stuff is designed to stifle our industry. Carbon caps. All this stuff is unreasonable. Stuff that I never dreamed would ever happen.
I mean, look at the carbon cap as an example, right? We have one of the largest gas fields in the entire world. The Montney gas field has just been reassayed at 4 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, okay? So if you were to hook the Montney field up to giant cogeneration plants and put it into the Alberta power grid, there's enough gas in that gas field to power Alberta electrically for the next 1,000 years. Okay? You could take that entire gas field, and of course we all know that one of the big costs of AI is cooling, right? And build a giant cogeneration plant near Grand Prairie. You could turn Grand Prairie, Alberta into the world's largest artificial intelligence hub, right? Where your cooling costs would be negligible because there's only 4 months of the year that you would actually have to pay for cooling. All you'd have to do is put vents in the ceiling of your buildings hooked up to thermostats, and anytime it got too warm, you just flick on a vent and bring in cold air from outside and cool everything in the building, right? Why are we not doing that, right? Why can't we find capital investment to build that project? With the price of natural gas, it's a no-brainer, right? But we have that carbon cap, right, that Ottawa has put on us. Danielle Smith is still supporting $100 a ton industrial carbon tax on natural gas in this province, which is a travesty, right? So nobody wants to invest here. Why would they? When Ottawa has made it clear that they don't want people investing in any way that uses our power or uses our natural gas. I mean, under Trudeau, I mean, he told Germany and Japan came here on bended knee saying, can you please send us Alberta natural gas? We'll liquefy it and we'll take LNG from Alberta. Oh no, there's no business case for LNG out of Alberta. There's no business case. You can't have that gas. And then what happens? Trump, in his last trade deal with Europe and Japan, strikes a $750 billion trade deal to supply LNG to Japan and to Germany using Alberta natural gas that they're paying $4 an MCF for, and then they're selling it to Germany and Japan for $14 an MCF.
Yep.
So, Trudeau and Carney completely screwed us. The gas is still going to be leaving Alberta and is still going to be contributing, to this overall, global CO2, phony crisis that Trump rightly called a scam at the UN. But, who's getting screwed? Alberta's getting screwed, right?
Alberta's citizens are getting screwed, though.
Yeah.
So Mr. Trudeau said what? It's not in our business plan. Well, what's their business plan then? To break Albertans, to make them poorer?
Well, I want to
that's my point.
You guys are laying down, continuing to build the case of why Alberta continues to get the raw deal. We've also covered that extensively about the how we're literally chasing money away that could be entering Canada.
Well, like with your Titanic example, say the Titanic's Alberta and the Iceberg is Ottawa. Imagine a giant hand picking up that iceberg and repeatedly smashing the ship into little bits. That's what Ottawa is doing to Alberta on a regular basis.
Okay, so a couple of things I want to touch on what you guys both, because there's a lot there what you just said. Mitch, you started off by talking about you're talking about intent.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So I know, so for the average, I would say reasonable citizen, they would be afraid to judge or talk about the intent. Why would somebody like a leader in their right mind, like Prime Minister Carney or former Justin Trudeau, want to intentionally hurt and make citizens poorer?
So
let's talk about intent. Why do you guys think that to judge, obviously, the intent of them?
Okay, so I'll go first, Jeff,
Sure.
then you go. Okay, so here's the thing. Why? Because they're showing us they're doing it.
Okay.
They're continually showing us they're doing it. Just that example with not
Either
selling.
they're incredibly stupid or...
No.
they're
That is the problem.
Okay.
The corruption is the problem, right? We've got. Okay, let's just garner up $1 million here. We got Trudeau proroguing Parliament because he can't find $400 million in a slush fund. Right, we got the ad scam thing, which is however many millions of dollars that they sealed for 75 years. Mm-hmm. Right, they don't want anybody to get the facts on that. They've got Gilbo, who they're looking at $240 million that he transferred himself to his business. They got a $240 million a vaccine plant that never produced any vaccines. They've got these $100 and some billion industrial projects that they've got 22,000 missing projects. Mm-hmm. It's one thing after another after another.
Okay.
And here's the thing. That they are not held accountable for any of it, right? And that's the problem. Even moving forward, they give us a couple pipelines. If these people are stealing everything that we're making, which is very clear to me that they are, then what's the purpose of having a pipeline? If they're not held accountable for the money that's missing or for the things that they're doing, how can we have, they're actually divorcing themselves from us because we didn't elect kings. We did not elect kings, and that's what they are. That's the way they're behaving.
But it's worse than that. When you look at Bill C-59, the so-called National Projects Act or whatever it is, right? So in effect, what they've done is they have institutionalized and through legislation passed a statute that's purely fascist in its inception and in its operation. And when I say that, I'm just going to go back to the classic term for fascism, which comes from Mussolini in 1938, when he said, the proper term for fascism really shouldn't be fascism. It's corporatism. It's a melding of the state and state-run and corporations aligned with the state for the most efficient operation of the country. Well, that's what's going on here, but it's not for the benefit of the country. It's for the benefit of all of Carney's, cronies through the World Economic Forum in Brookfield, right? So, in effect, what we have now through Bill C-59 is a situation where Carney, as the fascist dictator of Canada, decides which projects get built, which companies get sole source contracts to build those contracts. You know damn well that Brookfield is involved in every single one of them along the way. When Carney talks about the National Energy Corridor, he's not talking about pipelines. He's talking about high tension power lines and electricity that's all going to be powered by small modular modular nuclear reactors. They've just announced 3 of them being built in Ontario, subsidized up the yin-yang by the Canadian taxpayer, by Alberta taxpayers, right? And we all know that Brookfield has cornered the market on small modular nuclear reactors. So Carney's plan, when he tells us by the end of 2026, he wants 20% of the vehicles on the road in Canada and Alberta to be electric vehicles. This is all part of a corrupt scheme, so that literally every time somebody who's forced to have one of these useless vehicles that won't run for more than 150 kilometers in minus 40 degree weather, right? So you're not going to work in them if you work in the oil field or if you work on a ranch or whatever it is. These vehicles are completely useless unless you live in one of their 15-minute cities and aren't driving more than 30 minutes or 40 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. But the idea is flood the market with these vehicles so that every time an Albertan is forced to plug one of these stupid things into a wall socket, right? Yep. They're literally siphoning money out of your back pocket through the wall socket into a Brookfield-run power grid, through Carney's stock options into his offshore bank account that he won't let anybody know about. So that's what this is. This is pure corruption from start to finish. Carney, like 3 months ago, was acknowledged to have 103 conflicts of interest. I'd hate to know what they are now. I bet you he's over 300 or 400 by now. Because every dirty deal he does, Brookfield's involved.
Yeah. So all of what you're saying, and don't get me wrong, when you are looking at people in Canada, there's been, Pierre Poilievre has been on this about reopening, right? Ethics looks into what are his conflicts of interest and all that. So just, I'm going to add some words, and not trying to put words in your mouth, but here's the correlation. Alberta, by the time we actually vote, because some people in the East and people who voted for Carney or people who are whatever, they might say, well, that's the Prime Minister's job, is to go ahead and to choose what projects and what we're moving forward on and to bring whatever, to continue to lead. He was voted in on a minority government. But you guys have also argued that Alberta doesn't even have a say, because by the time the vote gets here, also you look at representation. We talk about the Senate. You can talk about the disproportionality of representation across our provinces. That's all part of the case of Alberta doesn't have a say anyways. We are subject to the corruption that you guys are stating simply because of the way our federation is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look at Atlantic Canada. They have all of Atlantic Canada combined. So that's Newfoundland, PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, right? All 4 of those provinces combined have half of Alberta's population. They generate literally 1/5 of Alberta's gross domestic product, right? Mm-hmm. Yet they have 30 Senate seats to Alberta's 6. Yeah, right? Yep. It's despicable. I mean, the country doesn't work.
So we for today, because anyone who's watching can go follow you on X. They can see your interviews. They can see you guys have laid an extensive case about why Alberta should seek independence, and that's the best path forward, as you said earlier, for survival. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on continuing to build the case, and we naturally will throughout the next hour or so. I want to focus a bit more on where are we at, where's the movement, relationship with UCP, all the things that, because people might be wondering, where are we at, right? You hear of it during in April, during the federal election. Obviously, there was at least in the social media world where people are getting their news from, you see a rise of momentum and people are awareness of it. And I want to get to that a bit more, and we'll continue laying the case as you guys do in the rest of this interview. Can you let me know right now, though, just to give a quick update, where are we at with the move towards independence?
I'm doing town halls mostly every night.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so we did one last night in Okotoks. Just for example, we had 800 plus people there, hand counted. They had 700 chairs, they had to bring out everything they had. So the point of it is that everywhere we go, 60 to 70% of the people are new people that have never been to a political meeting.
Okay.
So everybody says, oh, you're talking to each other, but we're not actually talking to each other. We're talking to everybody, because this message, according, even Jeff alluded to it a little bit earlier, is very nonpartisan. Like, just for example, let's talk about the teachers. They just struck. Mm-hmm. They're looking for a 4% pay increase. Mm-hmm. So we're offering basically a 30 to 35% pay increase on day one, when we cut out all the federal taxes and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So on day one, we're talking about Albertans becoming better off, and that's the goal. And the other thing is that once people hear our message, and once people come to a town hall, and I would challenge you to have the courage to come and listen. Come to a town hall and listen. Yeah. We've had 75 of them now. We've talked to probably 35, 40,000 Albertans in person. And you know how many protesters we've had? One person. And we had 6 people.
Does this person keep showing up?
Well, no, they never show up. And it's fine that they don't show up. But if they would show up and be respectful and sit and listen, you know what? We're very convinced that once they understand what we're talking about, that they will clearly be in favor of an independent Alberta, because we've challenged the Premier to come up with one reason why we should stay. One thing that would be better for Albertans. Why should we stay, other than the fact that we like Canada's national hockey team and all the rest of that kind of stuff, and I'm 100% on board with that.
Let's dispel some of the myths. Some people might be thinking, why we should not leave, because they might think, am I going to lose my Canadian citizenship?
No. Absolutely not. Canada doesn't recognize the renunciation of Canadian citizenships. Look at all the Americans.
So they'll be dual, is what you're stating?
Absolutely. Look at Mike Myers that came up, Mr. Elbows Up with Mark Carney, that was that commercial they did. He became an American citizen after becoming a Canadian citizen. He was originally a citizen of the United Kingdom, right? So the first sentence of the U.S. citizenship oath is that you renounce all other citizenships, right? And all other ties to all foreign potentates, blah, 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 right? So Mike Myers essentially coming up here and claiming that he's a Canadian, he should have his American citizenship revoked because he swore a false oath. Because he hasn't renounced his Canadian citizenship. He still claims to be a Canadian. The government, recognizes him as being a Canadian. Whenever it suits him, he comes up here and puts on his little red and white, jersey, in the same way Danielle wears that stupid red blazer and white blouse of hers and dresses up like a Canadian flag, right? Comes up here and, claims to be a Canadian. Like, you don't lose Albertans will not lose their Canadian citizenship or their Canadian passport once they become, once Alberta becomes an independent country. The other thing they won't lose is people, there's a big lie that's going around. Like, one of the reasons that Lukasik got as many people to sign his stupid petition in the old folks' homes and the memory care wards that he was trolling through, right, was he was telling them all they were going to lose their pensions. Oh yeah, if you vote for independence, they want to make you an American and you're going to lose your CPP. That's a lie. CPP is a contractual right. The government, if it owes people, whether it's a government pension because you served in the military or you served in the Canadian government or whatever it is, those pensions are owed under a contract. They're not going to be rescinded simply because you live in a jurisdiction that's declared itself independent from Canada. You don't lose your CPP living in an independent Alberta any more than if you lived in Portugal or Spain.
So there's no fine print in there about what's causing to lose.
No, it's just a lie. It's just it's a bunch of liberals. The only thing they have to sell is fear, because they can't tell Albertans what the benefit will be of staying in Canada from a financial perspective, because there are no benefits financially to staying in Canada, from a financial perspective.
So you mentioned on day one being better off, and we can talk about what dollar we use and all that jazz. It is a very deep, complex issue when it comes to trade, when it comes to other nations recognizing military protection. Like there's a lot of layers to this. And obviously everything won't be settled, I'm assuming, on day one. We'll have to define what does day one even mean. Like this is a long process, it's not just an overnight thing. Do you guys have concerns? And some people's concerns might be, well, what about economic uncertainty when it comes to a new nation starting out and outside investment? We already don't have outside investment coming, but will that change? Will that take a while to establish and see, is it a reliable place we can actually put our money?
Well, how much more uncertain can it be than what's going on now?
It's a fair point.
I mean, it's leaving. It's not coming here. It's leaving. So the investment, actually, I have a graph that shows it's in the negatives. People are pulling their money out. No money's coming in at all. So what people are concerned about is that, Poilievre said it. They're worried that we're going to become a socialist country, and that's exactly where we're headed. So, you can't put that back in the box. Mm-hmm. So if Canadians or Albertans, let's talk about Albertans, if Albertans want to maintain their freedoms, we have to get away from those people in the East. And that's exactly what we're messaging. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're not divorcing Canada. Canada's changing everything and forcing us out, the way I see it. It's absolutely. Since when did we ever think that a federal government would attack industry, their biggest industry? Since when did we ever think that they would be talking about censoring us? Since when would we ever thought that we'd ever lose any of our freedoms? I'm old enough to remember that even that conversation would be a very controversial conversation at all. Never thought this would ever happen. So now here we are, sitting in a situation where we have to actually be forced to choose between what they're offering and what we have here. So we have to stand up to this. I have a story, and here's the thing. I was talking to a soldier just recently in Saskatchewan, and he said there's a currency that we're going to have to pay for our freedom. The currency we used when we were in the military is blood. So our people are going to have to show up and pay attention to what's going on. The currency that they're going to have to do is to show up and pay attention to what's going on here, and that's everybody. I don't think there's anybody on the left that thinks that, oh my God, I'm going to be poorer on purpose because they're going to make us poorer. They're on the street striking for more money, and yet we have a federal government that's consciously trying to suppress our industry and make us poorer. And they're doing it.
I mean, one of the things that everybody needs to internalize, and all the unions need to internalize, Carney, as a central banker, right? And they did this knowingly, all the central banks. They have doubled the M2 money supply in Canada. Carney was involved in that.
M2, just clarify what that is.
Well, that's the total money supply for the country.
I see. Okay.
So what they've done is they've doubled the amount of Canadian currency that there is in circulation. So if you think about that, if you just basic economics, if you double something, what have you done? You've made it worth half as much. So what Carney and all of his cronies have done, and the interesting thing is all of the central bankers have done it in lockstep. The European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the U.S. Fed, et cetera, et cetera. So the arbitrage spreads haven't been that far out of whack because they've all been doing it at the same speed post-COVID, right? But why do you think everything costs twice as much when you go to the grocery store? Right? The reason it costs too much is because your money's worth half as much. So they've literally robbed every Albertan of half of their savings, half of their home equity, half of the value of their portfolio, et cetera, through this blind, basically hidden theft that was engineered by Carney and the other central bankers because, of course, they, spent themselves into massive amounts of debt during COVID. And what's the easiest way for a banker to get rid of debt? Let's just devalue all the debt by printing money, right? So that's what they've been doing, and that's what we need to get away from.
And the other thing they've been doing is we pay more taxes than any country in the world. We pay 33 taxes. And how is that going to make anybody richer? Who's that going to make richer? We pay 43% of our total income in taxes. Nowhere in the history of the world has taxation ever got to this level that nations have not gone to war.
I think that most people will recognize that taxes is insane in terms of where we've been at. And you're seeing your dollar go not as far. You're seeing all these issues.
Under Harper.
And there's no indication that there's a shift or a change coming for that, by the way.
Under Harper, Canadian taxes were at such a low level and such a manageable level because several generations of prime ministers after Trudeau won, who'd spent us into a massive financial hole, right? So you had Mulroney, then you had Chrétien and Paul Martin. Paul Martin, incidentally, from my perspective, was one of the best conservative finance ministers the country ever had, right? And then followed by Harper. I mean, 3 governments worked their asses off to pay Canadian debt down to a manageable level so that it wasn't taking up 50% of every tax dollar, right? So, and then along comes Trudeau II, right? Trudeau II. And Trudeau II basically blows that out of the water and goes, hey, Dad, you racked up some debt, but hold my beer, right? I'm now going to, create, more debt than Canada's ever seen. I'm going to create more debt than has been created by every single prime minister cumulatively since the start of Confederation. We're now pushing $3 trillion in debt. And once again, we're at a point where the interest on on the Canadian national debt is fully taking up 50% of every tax dollar that's being collected.
Yep.
So that's why we're in this mess. And of course, why we're saying Alberta needs to get the hell out, because we didn't do this. We didn't vote for these idiots. People in Ontario and Quebec and the Maritimes did. Let them pay it off.
Yeah.
Right?
The economic argument, I like playing devil's advocate, and it's hard to play devil's advocate because the data is there regarding the economics in Canada.
It's really hard to pretend you can't do basic math.
100%. And everyone's feeling it, though. You mentioned the grocery store. Everyone's feeling it when you go to the grocery store, when you look at the taxes you have to pay. Like, people are...
I was joking.
That's what's turning, I think, contributing, people are starting to feel it in their actual pocket.
I was joking with my wife the other day. I went and bought a rib steak at Co-op, and it was, really, nice, steak and cook, throw it on the barbecue, whatever, and feed 3 people, sort of cook it like a roast, whatever. It was $95. Yeah. I told my wife, I said, oh my God, who'd have thought if you go to Co-op to buy a steak, you need a bank loan, right? To buy a steak. It's ludicrous. Right?
I used to joke, ribeyes only in our house. And now when you walk by, that's a pretty thin steak for $56. Yeah, ribeye coming. My wife got me a Traeger last year. So I love smoking meat. It's like, my goodness, you see the price of meat go up so fast.
So the other part of this whole thing is there's been no audit on all that money.
Yeah.
So what's happened? Where is it? That's my question. Where is it? They printed $323 billion 1 year during COVID with no audit. Where'd that money go?
Well, and on top of it, where did all the money that we've been funneling into Ukraine go? I'd like to know how much of it's found its way back into offshore bank accounts of various liberal politicians that have been waving the Ukrainian flag in the air for the last number of years. Oh, just got to send them another $5 billion, right? Another billion here, another billion there.
So, let me ask you guys a question with the APP's stance. Is there any, because everything you're laying is groundwork as to why there is no future for Alberta, or prosperous future within Canada. Talked about corruption, and you can talk about Ukraine, you can talk about U.S., you can talk about all this stuff. The corruption is nothing new to governments in the history of humanity.
It's never been at this level in Canada, though.
Okay,
this is an entirely new level.
Okay.
The other thing is too, and I mean, I'd like your viewers to go to the Alberta Prosperity Project website.
Okay.
So that's just albertaprosperityproject.com, right? Pretty easy. And there's a document on that website. It's free to download, and it's a document entitled "The Value of Freedom," and it's a fiscal plan for an independent Alberta, right? And what that document shows is that the Alberta taxpayers and Albertans, including CPP and UI, we send $70 billion a year to Ottawa, right? Every year, $70 billion a year. We get less than $20 billion a year back in federal transfers and federal services, including CPP and UI. Like, we are being robbed blind by this country. And I mean, you brought up national defense earlier. How many people in Alberta or in Canada actually think we have a national defense, right? It's a joke. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a combat engineer. I mean, at that time, we had 85,000 people in the Canadian Armed Forces when I was serving. We have less than half of that now. We couldn't field a
No doubt we're reliant on the U.S.
We could not field one single combat division if we had to. I don't even think we could field the brigade. It's so any of this talk about, a national defense, it's a joke. Like, so what are we paying for? As Albertans, we're not paying to be defended nationally. We've been hiding under the American security umbrella forever. While thumbing, and now Carney's thumbing his nose at the U.S. I mean, we're literally the worst neighbors in history when it comes to like how the Canadian government is now treating the U.S. I mean, we could have wiped out our trade deficit overnight by simply saying, you know what, President Trump, you're 100% right. That trade deficit's out of hand. You say it's $200 billion. Both of our trade officials actually have the number at $57 billion. Why don't we solve a bunch of problems together, right? So let's wipe out the border control problem, the trade imbalance problem, the fentanyl problem, all at one go. We're going to immediately place an order for $57 billion worth of American military equipment, surveillance drones, helicopters, armored personnel carriers, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to deploy them all the way along the border. We'll enter into a joint task force with the U.S. We don't care. We'll pass the notwithstanding clause. You guys want to fire Hellfire missiles at fentanyl labs in Canada? We're all for it. We don't want this stuff in our country either. Let's work on this together. Let's solve the problem overnight. What would Trump have said? He would have posed there with Justin Trudeau with his arm around his shoulder and said, what a good guy, right? Mm-hmm. Look at this. He understands our problem. Yeah. Let's work together. I mean, what else could he say? Yeah. But, instead it's, elbows up. Let's, keep sticking a thumb in in the American's eye. Carney recently announced that he wants to, contribute 250 billion Canadian dollars to the defense of Europe. Wants to join the EU.
Yeah.
And then announced the other week that, we're no longer going to be, quote unquote, that we no longer have a relationship with the United States. And then the week after that, they announced a strategic partnership with China. We're still at war with China. We've never signed a peace treaty over Korea and over the Chinese murdering countless Canadian soldiers that were in Korea under the UN banner during the Korean War. But we're in a strategic partnership with the Koreans, and we're telling the Americans to go get stuffed? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, what kind of country is this anymore?
Well, no doubt the whole trade talks with the U.S. have been completely mishandled in the last 7 months, and you have nothing to show for it. There is, and we've talked about this extensively as well, is that when you have your largest trade partner, admittedly, Prime Minister Mark Carney mentioned that our relationship with the U.S. has helped our economy grow over the last, four times or 400 times, whatever it is. But we've completely mishandled it, and we're in a desperate situation, and we're not in a situation where Canada can actually converse. We should not be. We're playing poker with the U.S. and we're bluffing, but our cards are exposed.
So we haven't.
That's exactly what we've been doing.
I think that's a good analogy.
Yes.
And when you look that so my point again, you've all been laying the foundation as to why Alberta needs to consider this. Question I want to pose: does the APP have any sort of hope that it can be reconciled under the existing Federation of Canada? Like Alberta can get a better deal like Danielle Smith? So it's no. It is pure path to independence. We're done. We don't believe you anymore. The time has come.
We don't believe them at all anymore. So since April 28th was a very important date for Alberta. So let me tell you what happened on April 20th. Of course, we lost election. I went into a little bit of a depression because, it would have been much easier for me personally if Poilievre had won. We wouldn't be on the road every night. We would have had a reprieve. But I really believe that we would have ended up here anyway. Now that I see how this is working, we're looking at two wings of the same bird somehow, and I don't understand how that works. But what we've got happening here is something that's been going on for 120 years. And that's what I've been made aware of, because I was never political before. So now I've woken up and I'm seeing that, the entire intent of annexing Alberta and Saskatchewan was to take what we produce and send it east to make the east better off. And that's never changed. From 1905, that was the intent of it, and it's never changed. Confederation is working exactly the way they want it to work. Trudeau appointed, 98 out of 107 senators.
It's a majority of them, yeah.
Yeah. So how can we ever have oversight over Parliament when all the people that are appointed there are Liberals? And they don't care about Alberta. Most of them don't live here. So they got absolutely no skin in the game. And here's the other thing. Alberta would be one of the richest countries in the world, but that's very important, and that should make it easier for us to go. But the other thing that we should be talking about as well is Albertans are being actually forced to lose their rights and freedoms based on things that are being passed down east. And most of Albertans don't realize exactly the depth of what these bills could actually do to their lives. I mean, C-293 is going to attack our farmers, and I mean, if you don't believe that's real, look what's happened in BC. Mm-hmm. So they literally seized this guy's land and killed his herd. So based on any emergency that they conceive to be an emergency, they can come to your farm, seize your land, and take over your herd. So why would a government that has your best interests at heart pass legislation, bill after bill after bill, that actually hurts the citizens? Explain that to me. And if they're consciously trying to hurt us, and they're showing it, and I mean, we could come up with a very comprehensive list of all the things that they've done to hurt Albertans and hurt Canadians, why are we still supporting these people?
Well, then on top of it too, sorry to jump in.
No, you're good. Go.
Danielle Smith has been made to look like a complete fool by Mark Carney. So 6 months ago, she said, look, here are the 9 bad laws that I want them to change. We want to end equalization. We want to stop this. We want to stop that, blah, blah, blah. What has come off of that list? Not one single thing. So now her new gambit is, because she's being continually screwed over by the federal Liberals, surprise, surprise, she has that, she's forced into the desperate maneuver to say that the Alberta government's now going to be a pipeline proponent, and the Alberta government is going to put forward a pipeline application through the process, because no private company in their right mind wants to get involved in the mess that's, is Canadian pipeline construction regulation, right? So Danielle's putting the bill forward. What's the federal response? The federal response is, the minister, Tim Hodgson comes out and says, oh, well, like that tanker ban thing is purely hypothetical that, that Danielle Smith is going to succeed in getting her pipeline application approved. They're not even going to have the initial environmental, stuff into us for 6 months. We don't need to look at any of these bad laws right now. That's not a priority for us, whatever. And what does that do? I mean, it sends a message to the global investment community that do not consider for 1 minute that you should be investing money in Alberta, because the federal government is at war with the government of Alberta and the citizens of Alberta and is trying to destroy that economy. They're trying to keep all the oil and gas in the ground. They're telling people that, you can only get oil and gas out of the ground if you spend $50 billion on stupid carbon sucking machine projects that decarbonize oil and, all this nonsense that they're coming up with. I mean, how the hell is that? Like Danielle says, you've played hockey, right? Danielle says, I'm on Team Canada. And then, the Premier of Quebec says, oh, you can't have a pipeline through Quebec. So one of her teammates elbows her in the mouth. Then she says, I'm on Team Canada. And then David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia, cross-checks her in the face. What kind of team is that to play on?
So let's move towards, we're talking about Premier Smith already. I want to get to the relationship between the APP and her and the UCP and how is that working. But I'll say this, I'm a little sympathetic to where she comes from. I'll back up for a second to when she initially changed some of the requirements in regards to the signatures that are required and the time frame, extended the time frame and lowered the amount of signatures required for a referendum to happen. So for me, the way that I perceived it as a citizen here in Alberta is she said she wants to see a new deal, a strong Alberta within Canada, but she will respect a citizens movement essentially if that comes to it. And it looked like to me that she was trying to create a path towards that could be led. Whether she's playing a political game, and I understand if you are the UCP government, you also want to avoid trying to fraction or split and maintain maybe the best of both worlds. But you guys have a stance of it's time for leadership, time for change, enough of that. But just, there's probably a lot of people like me that are sympathetic to her on that stance. Why have you guys been butting heads on that?
Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so first of all, I'm a UCP CHR.
Okay,
I'm in the UCP party.
Yeah.
Okay, so understand that. I was UCP Chair of the Year 2 years ago for the whole province.
Okay.
So I've done a lot of really good work for Danielle Smith.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've hosted her for 3 premiers' dinners, raised a whole bunch of money for her, actually gave her 75% of the first dinner so that she could run against the NDP and give her extra money so that she could win. Mm-hmm. I actually went to the AGM last year on 100% support of Danielle Smith, and you can find those television commercials on national TV, go backwards. Mm-hmm. And I'm asking people all over Canada to actually support Danielle Smith based on the new Bill of Rights that they passed, and that we were advocating for gun rights, and she was promising gun rights, she was promising the right to bear arms, she was promising, all manner of things, bodily autonomy, informed consent, all manner of that kind of stuff that was being put on the table in front of the membership, and we had supermajority support on all of it. Okay, so the thing, none of those things have happened. Mm-hmm. So just saying.
Yep.
So none of those things have happened. And my biggest problem with this government in its entirety is that it doesn't represent its base.
Okay.
And I'm going to share a story for you, and it's kind of interesting if you're sitting in my position. So way back in the day, we went to the first AGM that I ever went to, and there was 1,700 people there. And there was a particular reporter in Calgary who came to me, and he said to me, this cannot represent the base of the party. And I said to him, well, they're the people that showed up. And, at that particular time, what I consider the Wild Rose side of the UCP actually won all the seats on the provincial board that day. So they swept 9 out of 9. They all went to the grassroots type people. And, the progressive part of the party didn't have any candidates left in that time. And it happened again the following year when we had like 3,600 people come to the AGM. And they said, well, this again, same reporter comes to me and he says, this does not represent the base of the party. And I said, well, that's interesting. That's your opinion, but I believe that, this is a pretty good cross-section of Albertans. So fast forward to last year, the biggest political event in Canadian history. Okay, so we had 6,600 or 6,700 people
That's
there.
not true. Our rally in Edmonton was bigger.
Yeah, well, that was up until then. But at any rate, so we get all these people in. It's a full-time job for me getting people to the AGM to support Premier Smith, right? And she won her nomination. She won the special general meeting with a 90-some% majority. However, moving forward into this now, so everybody was expecting Pierre Poilievre to win this election.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, right? And so there was a lot of those, and the Premier herself was expecting Pierre Poilievre to win this election and wasn't expecting to have to go down this road to continue to fight with the Trudeau now Carney Liberals. So as a consequence to that, here we are today. Everybody was waiting for Pierre to win so that we could get all these things that we were talking about getting. And now all of a sudden we've got Carney in there and we're not getting any of it. So now we've gone 10 years of straight Liberal government and nothing. And here's the way I see this. I don't see us ever getting another Conservative government. And I think that's very clear now. If they can behave the way they behaved for the last 10 years and still maintain government, what's it going to take to get those people out of there?
So that's the straw that broke the camel's back.
That's the straw that broke the camel's back, right there. So that's why I say April 28th is the
big day.
Okay. So moving forward about Danielle.
Yep.
So we have a Premier's dinner right away after the election in Bonnyville, my CA. We had 800 people at $250 a plate. I asked a question, not knowing the answer, because this is people throughout my community.
Ask the question publicly?
I asked the question publicly. Okay, how many people here are in support of an independent Alberta? 800 out of 800. Okay. All right.
Was this the AGM you're saying?
No. This is a Premier's dinner in my CA.
Okay.
All right. So fast forward to now. So what we've got happening now is we've got the Premier, and we asked her that same question that night. I said, okay, so how long are we going to pander to this Liberal group of people that continue to abuse us and give them a shot at what's going on? She said 6 months. That's expired now.
Yeah.
Okay, so now she's continuing to do it. And so now, with everything that I've outlined to you about...
And to be clear, the 6 months was for the demands that she made publicly about access to tidewater ports, pipelines. There's 4 or 5 main demands. Just
9, yeah. But
was there not? Okay.
Yeah, so however many demands she had, it didn't matter. She didn't get any of them.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is up to this point now. So we've got 10 years.
Was there an ultimatum at the end of the 6 months,
yes,
by the way?
Or else it's going to affect national unity.
Okay.
Was what she said, right?
It's vague, but sure.
Right. I mean, and truthfully, that's what set APP in path.
Okay.
That's what set APP in motion. So if you're going to affect national unity, what does that mean to you? What it means is it's going to cause a referendum for independence for Alberta. That's the only thing it could mean. So as a consequence to that, all of a sudden, the APP went from a fairly small group to a Goliath. We were onboarding 5,000 people an hour.
I remember seeing that.
At that point.
Did one of you guys tweet that or something?
Yeah.
I remember seeing that.
Probably Jeff. Jeff tweets all that stuff. So at any rate, so now we've got 250,000 people in our group that we can access, that we could talk to. That's a clean database that want in an independent Alberta. And not only that, the conversation is happening everywhere. It's not a conversation that's just restricted to, and not only that, compared to COVID, it's not a volatile conversation. Like if you talk to somebody and said, what's your vaccine status? It would cause an absolute war. But you can actually go to anybody now and say, hey, what do you think about an free and independent Alberta? And you know what the reception is? Very, very positive. And I'm going to tell you what else. We had a conversation with Parti Québécois that lasted 4.5 hours. And we found out that the left and the right actually are not that far apart. Both parties agreed that, you know what, we could get a lot done between the two of us. But here's
who is that with, the other party?
With Parti Québécois.
Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, the leader of the PQ.
Yeah.
So we both agreed that the level of government that we can both do without is the federal level. And the other thing that we agreed on, and what got him going in politics, was ad scam. So he was the lead lawyer on ad scam in Quebec. And once he saw the corruption that's involved at the federal level, he said, we got to get away from this. So now we've got 10 years plus 6 months, and now we're still negotiating with these people that are confirmed criminals. We see that they're confirmed criminals, and there's no other way to put it. So they won't. How do you negotiate with those people when they don't follow any rules?
Jeff, question for you. What do you expect Danielle Smith to do? Like in your book, what would make you happy for a premier to do?
Well, I think she needs to stop waffling on the issue and stop repeating that slogan of hers, a strong Alberta within a united Canada, and acknowledge the fact that 70% of the base of the UCP is in favor of independence. And if she's a Democratic leader, elected by the base of her party, she needs to start supporting independence and stop playing this mealy-mouthed game where she can't, she's trying to, I'm for Canada. And, she needs to stop lying to people about the fact that the Constitution of the UCP, prevents her from, supporting independence. It's just pure BS, right? The bylaws of the UCP do not do that in any way whatsoever. There was a letter agreement, between Brian Jean and Jason Kenney, two avowed Federalists who, when they merged the UCP with the Progressive Conservative Party, put in their letter, and again, it was just basically a screw you to the, independence movement within the Wild Rose base, that the newly formed party, would be a party that respects Alberta's position within Confederation. But you can't have, Jason Kenney and Brian Jean, determining the future of Alberta, and the UCP in a letter agreement between the two of them that didn't make it into the bylaws of the party.
Yeah.
So, she needs to stop lying to people about this stuff. I mean, she knows it's, excuse my language, but I mean, she knows it's.
So do you think she believes that truly, or is this her premier hat that she's stating that a strong Canada?
Well, I think she needs to remember who elected her. I mean, because that's the problem she's got. I mean,
so you say your base, the UCP that put her in, you're saying over 65, 70% people are in favor of independence.
And if you looked at the people specifically who voted for her during the leadership, when you look at the fact that, that Brian Jean, as an example, his candidacy, he made his whole candidacy on the basis that he had the guts to show up at an APP leadership forum and look all the separatists in the eye and tell all of us that, that we're for supporting an independent Alberta. So Brian Jean was, staunchly, pro-federalism. Taves was the Jason Kenney candidate, right? So Travis Taves was a staunch pro-federalist. I want to say Sonia Sotomayor, but the name I'm trying to remember. Anyway, one of the other candidates in the UCP election, Rajan Swanee, probably the most left-wing, member of the UCP. She was strong Federalist. So all of those votes, all of the Federalist votes went to those candidates, right? So, and all of the pro-independence votes, went to Danielle Smith and Todd Loewen, right? So, the people that elected Danielle Smith premier were probably, 85, 90% pro-independence. And she doesn't care. She doesn't care about the people that elected her leader. She doesn't care that 70% of the base of the party, supports independence, right? She's doing her own thing because all of the billionaires that support her, there's quite a few of them that, favor the status quo. They've all made their billions of dollars, operating within the Canadian tax system. They've all got their tax shelters built. They've all got their castles in England and Italy and wherever else they want to, sit down and gorge on creme anglaise or whatever the hell it is that they do. All of those people are not in favor of independence because they don't want any disruption, to the Toronto Stock Exchange, their offshore bank accounts, any of those things. And those are the people that have Danielle on speed dial, right?
So just let me kick something very important in.
Sure.
Danielle ran on the Sovereignty Act.
That's right.
Right. So that's a big part of this, right?
It is.
So that's part of her identity. And that's actually what flipped me.
Okay.
Brian Jean's from my area.
Yep.
And we thought Brian Jean would make a good premier being from the fact that he's from my area. And I actually hosted her in Bonnyville to speak at what was supposed to be a leadership thing with both of them. But Brian declined to come, so Danielle came on her own. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the evening, with Sovereignty Act, she had actually convinced everybody in the room that she was the path, based on the fact that she was ready to do something that would make Alberta more sovereign. And so as a consequence to that, she's got all of our support. But what has she done to make Alberta more sovereign? Like, I mean, that's a question that we're asking ourselves, and I'm with you. I would like to give her as much rope as I can give her and hall pass, and I totally understand that, she's in a situation where she's ruling the province, not just for us. Mm-hmm. I get that, and I totally understand that. I mean, at some point, though, you have to look at the entire situation and understand it's either fixable or it's not fixable. And if it's not fixable, then you have to do what's best for Albertans.
Well, and I think that's a good way to put it. And using the rope example, everyone's got different lengths of rope they're willing to extend, right? Mm-hmm. APP and people who have a hardline stance of Canada is not going to make it better for Alberta. That rope is at its limit. It's taut. There's some of us who are still figuring out what length of rope do we have. And I might argue, and excuse my ignorance, is there a part of this as a political dance and a political game of trying to figure out, and it's just things move slow because the nature of political, provincial and federal politics and making this move forward? Is there a part of that in terms of this timing of Danielle Smith maybe not moving fast enough in the 6 months? And you know what I mean?
So my answer to that is she determine the length of her own rope.
Okay, fair enough.
Right? She said 6 months. Mm-hmm. Right? So we had nothing to do with that.
So at the 6 months, would you have expected initiate a referendum?
Well, I would have expected something else.
Okay.
I mean, things are changing so fast at the federal level. Like all of these bills that they're introducing now are making a situation that we don't have time to wait.
Yeah.
So how far down this road are we going to go to allow them to keep doing and passing the stuff that they're passing and then put us deeper and deeper in a hole? So if everything could say, look, let's put a stop to everything, and that would be my preference. Let's just say, okay, you can't pass anything else now that's going to hurt us. Let us stop and evaluate this entire situation, and then we could make a decision. But what's happening, everything over there is working at warp speed, and we're sitting here waiting. And our situation is daily getting worse. And that's the problem. That's where the emergency comes in. That's where the emergency actually does come in, is because they're moving so fast at the other end, and we're waiting for something to happen here at our end.
Are you guys concerned at all about there's a history generally in conservatism about different factions that break off within conservative movements. Thus, we've called it splitting the vote. We've called all types of things. Are you guys concerned with people who are now critical of Danielle Smith and her take? Because we're going to see a provincial election within a year, right? I believe is it 2 years?
2027.
I thought it's 26. Okay, within 2 years. Part A, Part B. Should we have an answer on referendum and moving forward before that election? And secondly, are you concerned about potentially hurting ourselves even further? Because Danielle Smith didn't win by a lot if you count up the votes and where she won from over the NDP. Are you concerned that we could go backwards actually and put a government that's maybe not not nearly as for a potential referendum, right? The NDP would be staunchly against it.
I'm continually disappointed with the absolute cowardice of UCP members of MLAs and cabinet ministers, right? There were a lot of rumors floating around this summer that Danielle Smith could call a snap election, in August of, this past August, right? Mm-hmm. It would have been the best thing for her to do. Her popularity was at a height. She was, she was still only 2 or 3 months into, her, the courtship of Mark Carney program that she was working on, trying to get him to change the 9 bad laws. She could have easily said, look, I need a mandate to negotiate with the federal government. And she would have come back with even more seats. And on top of it, she could have got rid of a whole bunch of the Kennyites that are hanging over in her government that have been suppressing inquiries into into COVID, that have been, buried the COVID vaccine report that was completely damning of the government's response to COVID. All of these people that have literally been, hiding under their desks or trying to, maintain, various cover-ups of all of the bad things they did when Kenny was in, that all these people that have no place in government. She could have gotten rid of every single one of them, but no, of course she didn't do it. So now, she's weaker than ever politically. Her credibility has been completely, her credibility will be completely shot if she doesn't pull some magical rabbit out of her hat prior to Grey Cup, like she's promised to do. And if it had better be something more than some vague promise of a pipeline, because we all know that's BS, right?
Especially Bill C-69 hanging.
Yeah, so she's in a really, really tough place. I mean, I've said more than once that, that she's been burning political capital like a drunk lighting cigars with $100 bills, for the last 6 months.
Well, I think maybe that's why I'm sympathetic to her as well, because trying to put myself in her position, she represents Albertans, even not just people who have voted for her. And you look at, I want to get your thoughts on the Thomas Lukaszuk. I can't remember the name of his question he posed, but
his name's actually pronounced Łukaszuk in Polish. You'll talk to Eva about that when she comes on. Serious, his name is Łukaszuk. I think it's hilarious.
Well, you're talking the guy's got a lot of Polish in his background. I probably should have known that. Let's not go there. My mom's gonna get after me for that. But when it comes to, she represents Albertans, and there is a significant amount of Albertans, and let's call it numbers. Correct me on the numbers. Recent polls, I think, put at maybe 30, 35, 40%, somewhere in that range in terms of Albertans overall that would be in favor of a path to independence. Does that sound right?
I would say that's very low.
Okay.
But that's fine.
There's a Reid poll.
No, because of, you know what, polls just
understand. Take it with a huge grain of salt.
Right.
No doubt. I'm just trying to get us a baseline where people can know where we're at.
Let's just, for example, say, I'm not going to be optimistic. Let's say I'm being very pessimistic. Let's say mid-40s.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure that's reasonable. Okay, based on the fact that I've been...
Of the 4+ million people in Alberta?
100%.
Okay.
I've been to 75, 80 communities, including the big cities. We've talked to people. And the other question we ask people is, hey, how are your friends feeling about this?
Okay.
And they tell us, I think you're going to find that the overwhelming support for us is going to be in young people.
Just so you know, I can echo that sentiment. I ask everybody I talk to, whether they're pastors, business leaders, CEOs, community members. I ask everyone, and the overwhelming people I talk to are like, I'm interested.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know more. Or it's a resounding yes. Like, I very rarely have heard that's insane from Albertans.
Yes, and that's what I'm trying to say.
Just so you know.
That's what I'm trying to share with you. So you're seeing the same thing as I'm seeing.
All over.
So how
I've
do we...
probably over 200 people in the last 2 months.
Yeah, so how do we disregard that? You don't disregard that.
No, it's a serious thing. And I'll tell you a quick story, because recently I was in Toronto dealing with some cable execs in one of the big companies. And I just asked them, do you know what's going on with Alberta? Like, not even a clue. Didn't even think that the sentiment was real. And I educated her a little bit, saying, like, there is serious growing sentiment in Alberta. It's not a fringe. It's not a small amount of people.
No,
it gets dismissed by a lot of the media. And we mentioned media earlier in the problem we have in Canada. But it's definitely not. It's at a serious moment. And so let's call it your number, the 40% of Albertans.
Sure.
Thomas, I'm not even going to pronounce his proper name now. Thanks, Jeff, on that one.
Łukaszuk.
We'll let you jump in on that.
Łukaszuk, yeah.
Yep. What they did, and I'll say from what I read, was impressive, of 400,000 plus signatures in less than 90 days in the old requirements. And he posed a simple yes or no question, from what I understand. I want to hear your thoughts in a moment. Does that actually trigger a referendum? Because we saw a lot of social media stuff there.
You cannot.
It cannot. But there's also people, 400. Did they clarify how they answered the question? Was it 400,000+ signatures that answered yes, Alberta should stay?
No.
They didn't clarify.
It wasn't
a
referendum. Their entire process was: do you agree that Alberta shall have a referendum on the following question?
That's how it was posed?
Yeah. So
I must have misread that.
No, so afterwards, now Lukaszuk, or however you pronounce his name, is now backpedaling and saying, "I never want little Tommy," is what I call him, because he's teeny tiny. But anyway,
you're taller, by the way, than what I imagined. Just so you know.
I know I look shorter and fatter on that.
When you walked in the door, I was like, "Oh, he's taller than me," and I'm a tall guy.
But anyway, little Tommy. Is now backpedaling like crazy, saying, I never wanted a referendum. But I mean, Keith Wilson, myself, and others are all, gleefully, publishing online his application that made it clear that what the electoral officer of Alberta approved was a question to have a referendum on the question, should Alberta remain in Canada, yes or no? And of course, it's like, Danielle actually said, and it's one of the, I think one of the positive things she's done in the last couple of months. She said, look, as far as I'm concerned, that is a separatist referendum. You want to have a referendum on whether or not Alberta shall remain in Canada, yes or no. If people vote no, that's going to have consequences. And now, little Tommy's, no, we never wanted to have a referendum, like blah, 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 blah. He just looks like a buffoon. And I mean, because I've been telling people that he's been running a con job since day one, literally conning Albertans into thinking that his question has any merit whatsoever, because he put it forward as a policy question, not even a legislative question, right? Mm-hmm. And as a policy question, the question is effectively the same as asking from a legal perspective, should Alberta remain called, be called Alberta, yes or no, right?
Yeah.
So and in fact, when we were in front of Justice Feasby on the case that we're involved in on our referendum question, right? I raised that with Feasby. It's like, why is our question being referred to the court when Lukasik's question, should Alberta remain in Canada, yes or no, hasn't been referred? We think it's indicative of bias of the electoral officer. And the court said, oh, come on, Mr. Rath. We all know that, that question, should Alberta remain in Canada, is a legally irrelevant nothing burger. Right?
Yes, that's right.
So, little Tommy Nothing Burger and his Nothing Burger question, and so why was he gathering all these signatures? Is it to use that information to start a new political party? Is it to, help him, become leader of the, of the Progressive Conservative Party that's now sort of, arising from the ashes? Whatever he was doing, he sure as hell wasn't being honest with Albertans. And to the extent that he's now saying that he never wanted a referendum in the first place, his application then to Elections Alberta was a fraud on Elections Alberta, because it clearly says that he wants to have a referendum on that question. Now he's saying he never wanted to have a referendum.
So it's called the Forever Canadian question.
I call it a forever communism question,
okay.
But yeah, same idea. Right.
So that was their clarity on the question and what it posed. Where I'm going with this is Angus Reid, take polls with a grain of salt, in May had that 36%. You're calling it 40+%. The point is, significant amount of people, it's not just a fringe amount, that you guys and a lot of people agree that this is something that seriously has to be posed. So Thomas got his question out there, 400,000+ signatures. You've acquired a large database, as you've seen. You're saying 5,000 additions. Was that per hour, per day?
5,000 per hour.
Yeah, that's nuts. That's insane. I don't know how your system's held up to that.
Well, you know what? Actually, I saw it coming. So I actually made sure our system would be compliant to it.
Great.
So I saw it coming a month before, 6 weeks before. I said, look,
wow,
because I'm a retailer.
Yeah.
So if I put something online that we expect to get a lot of volume on, we've got to make sure that we can handle the volume. So we made sure that our system would handle the volume. We upgraded it, and it did very well. And it did do that. So you go ahead with your question, and I have something to add to it.
Hang on to that thought. Where is the APP at right now for our listeners? I know where it's at because you told me before, but where's it at right now in terms of the APP collecting the right amount of signatures that you need to actually trigger a referendum according to what Premier Smith and that they passed to make it happen?
So we have literally 250,000 people on a database that we can actually go to that said they will sign this referendum.
Yeah.
Okay, right now. So since Lukaszuk got 460,000, we would like to get 750,000.
But have you put a question out there that people can actually answer yet? Or
yeah. So
well, it's the question that's before the court right now, right?
Yes.
And that's specifically, do you agree that Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province in Canada?
They have to approve it.
Well, what happened was, and everybody says, oh, Danielle did such a good thing lowering the threshold. Mm-hmm. They also put in a provision that said that the electoral officer could refer any question for any reason to the court to determine whether it's constitutional
and that's
or not.
under the CIA?
That's the amended CIA.
Okay.
So effectively what that did was it slowed us down and bogged us down in court, because but for Danielle and her government putting that provision in the act, we would have been merrily gathering signatures this summer alongside of Lukaszuk, and would have had all of our signatures by now.
So you have to wait basically for them to say
now we're in court. I mean, I have to say, I want to compliment the Alberta government lawyers. It was it's going to be the only time in my career that I've been able to stand up in court and say, my lord, I have to advise you, or Mr. Justice, I have to advise you that this is the first time in my career that I can say I agree with absolutely everything that's been submitted by the lawyer for the government of Alberta.
Okay.
Right? I mean, the overview on their brief, could have been the overview on our brief. I mean, we take exactly the same position, which is this whole question being referred to the court was silly because, the Act, Section 2.4 of the CIA, says that any question that contravenes the Constitution of Canada, may be referred to the court, right?
Exactly.
Well, my question for everybody is, how can a process leading to a possible amendment of the Constitution contravene the Constitution?
It's a fair point.
It's it's law school 101. I mean, it's, and you got all these vaunted so-called constitutional scholars and all of these people coming up with all these, ridiculous, convoluted arguments where they're claiming that our question contravenes the Constitution, when the Clarity Act and the secession reference of the Supreme Court of Canada have made it clear that referenda are not legal processes and do not legally amend the Canadian Constitution. They are political processes whereby the citizens have the opportunity to offer their opinion on whether or not the Constitution should be amended. And then, and the other point is, how the hell can attempting to amend anything amount to a contravention? That would be like any time a member of Parliament sought to amend the criminal law and get rid of a crime, under the criminal code. Oh, well, they're trying to get rid of that crime. They're a criminal. They've broken the criminal law because they're trying to amend the criminal code. It's ludicrous. So it's a big waste of time. And, Danielle allowed that to, into the legislation, and all the people around her allowed that into the legislation. So
when did that happen?
So the question is, did they do it because they're foolish, or did they do it, on purpose? We don't know. Right. So, I suspect there was just ignorance on their part.
Can you hang on thought for 1 second?
I'm going to hang on here. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to clarify just so people are tracking what you just said. So make sure I understand too. You've got the question right now. It's held up in court. They are looking at the question whether it violates, I think it's Section 2.4 of the amended
CIA Citizen Initiative Act, right?
Which essentially states if the question contravenes sections 1 through 35 of the federal Constitution.
No. Yeah, that's right. Of the Constitution
of the Canadian Constitution, then essentially null and void. You can't use it. Toss in the garbage. And you're making a point, because I also saw you put this on X. The whole premise of putting forth a question to leave Confederation and the Constitution that we are under, why would we allow that Constitution to stop us from even asking the question and initiate when we want to leave it in the first place?
Right.
But
on top of it, it's clear. I mean, the secession reference and the Clarity Act make it clear that the only way a province can secede under the Canadian Constitution is under the amending formula in the Constitution. And the Supreme Court made it clear that a referendum itself does not legally amend the Constitution. It's simply the very, very first step in a long journey towards a possible amendment,
which is part of the Constitution for citizens' voices being heard.
Right, and then and then on top of it too, if you look at the Alberta Referendum Act, Section 1, it makes it clear that the government, so Danielle Smith, retains the jurisdiction to either allow a referendum to go forward or not go forward, right? And of course, there's been a lot of misleading statements and a lot of misleading law being put forward by these so-called, amicus curiae, who are supposed to be these great constitutional experts, deliberately, from my perspective, deliberately misleading the court by, not referencing the Clarity Act, not speaking at all to the secession reference, and putting forward, this is going to be mandatory because under Section 16 of the, Citizens Initiative Act, the electoral officer must refer a successful referendum petition to the minister, and then the minister must refer it to the cabinet, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so what? Because under Section 1, cabinet, or the lieutenant governor in council, as it's called in the statute, may initiate a constitutional referendum. So the discretion remains with cabinet as to whether there would be a referendum at all, even after we get our 177,000 signatures. And the lawyers that are arguing against us, I think, are being fundamentally dishonest by not referring to basic statutes and not referring to the law, and literally making up arguments that have no place whatsoever in a courtroom, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, good. Mitch, what was your thoughts?
So my thoughts on the whole thing is just understand that the whole premise beside the Citizens Initiative Act is to give the people a voice. How is it that Elections Alberta actually can weigh in on it? Elections Alberta's job is absolutely to run elections. It's not to decide what's in the election.
So how's elections Canada all of a sudden involved? Like,
how come they're involved?
But I'm asking.
No, elections.
Why are you bringing them up?
He's talking about elections Alberta.
Elections Alberta.
I'm
talking about elections Alberta. How is elections Alberta determining what the question is? I think what you need to do, the spirit of the Citizens Initiative
Did they influence the UCP
Act,
in that CIA? Is that what you're suggesting or saying?
They're basically blocking us.
Okay.
So the whole thing is this. Premier and I had a discussion on this kind of thing. So it came from the Swiss direct democracy system. We actually had a discussion on this before any of this happened. And the reason that they do it, the Citizens Initiative Act, is so people can ask questions of the government that basically government hasn't got the courage to ask questions of on their own. So they can shift the blame to the people. If the people want to do it badly enough, go out there, get enough signatures, put it on our desk, and then we're compelled to do something with it or not do something with it, right? So something as important as this is a question that, is going to have to be dealt with now because it's not going away.
Yeah.
But the whole spirit of the Citizens Initiative Act is not to have bureaucracy weigh in on it. And that's the problem with our whole system. Our whole system it doesn't matter what the people want. We want changes in AHS, for example. The bureaucracy is hard to move. And this is what's happening here. The bureaucracy is digging in on our question and stopping us from posing this question. So, and let's be clear on the differences between the two questions. From a purely citizen's point of view, layman's point of view, which is what I am compared to Jeff, I would say to you, you have to understand that Lukaszyk's is a policy question, right? And it will cause no change. Okay, I always liken it to in the world of bites. In the world of bites, Mr. Lukaszyk's question is a mosquito bite. Our question is like being bit by a great white shark because it will trigger real change. So the other thing that I wanted to explain to you is that based on our position and based on what we're doing, I've had conversation with people that were highly involved with Brexit. They started their petition in the low 30%. Okay, they say that if we're anywhere near or over 40, the chances of us winning this referendum are very, very good. So I'm just saying, because the other thing that we have to understand,
it's nothing to throw aside that number. People might think it's not a majority. No, it's no doubt a significant number.
It is,
and people need to be aware of that.
And the other thing that's going to happen, and that we know is solidly going to work in our favor, is that once people understand that this vote is real, they're going to want to know about it. And once people want to know about what's going on, and we can explain to them our side of this, they're going to see that there's absolutely no real tangible benefit to any Albertan to staying here in Canada. And that is going to be the biggest hurdle that they have to deal with. So what they're trying to do is block it before it gets there. And that's the way I'm seeing this.
So right now it's tied up in court. You're going to wait for an answer, either yay or nay. Basically, maybe there's a potential. Is there a potential that the UCP withdraw that section or vote against it? Can't they just present a motion and say, let's get rid of this?
I've been telling Danielle from day one that she could show real leadership and simply call a question that completely complies with the Clarity Act under Section 1 of the Referendum Act. She has the power and the authority to do that under Section 1 of the Referendum Act. That's what her base expects her to do. But she's not doing it because, of course, she wants us to go through the exercise of getting our 250,000 signatures or more on paper so that she can then find a parade to run out in front of and lead the parade, as opposed to, just going out on her own and doing it on her own because her base wants her to, right?
What's the timing of when you should be able to hear back on that? Is that
that's the good news. I mean, no, from a legal perspective, I mean, we're on we call it a rocket docket, right? Yep. So the hearing is going to be the 20th, 21st, or 19th, 20th, and 21st, I think, of November.
Oh, okay.
So coming
around
up,
the corner.
2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
And Justice Feasby, who I've appeared in front of on other matters, and he's a real straight shooter, he's told us that he'll have a decision for us prior to Christmas.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it's not something that's going to slow us down that much. Only, I mean, we've been deprived of the ability to go gather signatures when it's nice and warm in the summer, and we'll be starting in January.
Well, let's hope this fall continues.
And just to be clear on this, I don't disagree. I disagree with Jeff a little bit on this because I would rather collect the signatures.
Sure.
Oh no! I
would rather go out there and collect the
I think
signatures and have Danielle do it.
from a political perspective, I think that's the best thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
But but again, Danielle has the authority to call the question. The other reason that Lukasik is now backpedaling on his question, Danielle also has the authority to say, okay, Mr. Lukasik, thanks for showing us that 465,000 Albertans want a separatist referendum. Right? But if we're going to spend a bunch of money on a referendum, we're going to have a question that complies with the Clarity Act, and a question that complies perfectly with Section 1 Sub 3 of the Clarity Act would be, do you agree that Alberta shall cease to be a province of Canada and become an independent state? I mean, Danielle could say, thank you, Mr. Lukasik. Your question's stupid. The judge called it a nothing burger. We're going to have a real question if we're going to spend money on it. And our question's taken directly from the language of the Clarity Act. And we'll have a constitutional referendum on that question and let the chips fall where they may. That's why he's backpedaling so hard, right? And saying, we don't want a referendum, right?
Man, we're gonna have to. We only got a couple minutes left. I want to get we're gonna have to have you guys back in the next little bit because there's so much I didn't get to. We didn't even get to treaty rights, right? That's a big part of it. A couple of quick questions, if we can keep answers quick, just to get them in.
Yep.
Let's say referendum succeeds, majority. We start moving down the path. You start negotiating with Canada. What does it look like for a new nation with government? Does that mean our current government transfers to a new nation? Is there all new elections? What does that look like?
Well,
or is it uncharted territory?
And Jeff can finish it because he's actually writing the document. So
is that a long answer?
Yeah.
Okay, quickly first, before we go to the answer, Trump administration, someone has mentioned that they would be willing to recognize
shortest free trade agreement of all time, 1 page, 0 tariffs on both sides of the Alberta-U.S. border.
Alberta-U.S. or something.
Yeah, Alberta-U.S. border, all goods and services. We've also spoken to the U.S. about immediately recognizing Alberta as an independent country immediately upon a successful referendum result.
Who did you guys speak with? You said Trump administration.
Yeah, we were meeting at a very senior level. We're not going to disclose the identity of the people that we were meeting with, but I mean, people were leaving our meeting and going directly to the Oval Office.
And you went down to DC?
Yeah, we've been
twice.
to DC twice, and
okay.
I'm in touch with them, on a weekly basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
New constitution, right away. New government within 6 months. Everything changes.
Top to bottom.
Top to bottom.
I know you guys, last couple of days, actually our next guest we'll have on a little bit with Eva, and then you guys were going back and forth with Bruce Party in terms of the CIA and that. We had him on maybe a couple months ago, and he wrote a pseudo constitution with a whole new idea.
Yeah, I think pseudo is the right word.
We took it as a brain exercise in terms of like what is true for you, like in what it's worth. But so new constitution from the top.
Well, elected legislature based on population, elected Senate based on region, so the cities can't continue to override, the wishes of rural Alberta.
Yeah.
We'd have Senate seats for each of the treaty areas, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
There'd be equal representation, amongst the regions, of the province. We'd have an elected, executive. I'm ambivalent on whether we get rid of the monarchy or not. We could just promote the lieutenant governor to governor general, and
sure.
Whoever's going to be in the role of the premier, they could be prime minister or president within a constitutional monarchy of Alberta if that's where we wanted to go.
So
there has to be a vote. Yeah. There has to be a vote on that. People have to decide whether they want to get rid of
citizens led though.
And there's a lot of people in the soft middle that want to maintain the monarchy. There's lots of hardcore Republicans that want nothing to do with King Charles. I mean, it just depends on where you're at on the political spectrum. So that's an open question to be determined.
This is an interesting path that is being walked down. This is historic.
It's exciting.
Well, that's one way to describe. Some people might be very nervous about it. Some people are like, Jeremy and I, we've always talked about how it's like, I'm kind of up for the ride. I just want the best possible future for my kids. And one of the exercises, and I got to wrap up right away, one of the exercises we did a while ago is everyone has a line in the sand, but not everyone knows where their line in the sand is. Like, let's back up and be real practical. If Canada became a place where I actually could no longer put food on the table for my kids.
We're almost there.
That's an easy for everyone to say, I'm out.
We're almost there.
Right? Exactly. Or now take it one step further. I think everyone's got to do the brain exercise and be like, where is my loyalties to Canada versus the loyalties to what I can build with my life? For as citizens of Alberta, I think everyone should ask that simple question. Where is my line in the sand as to when I would actually, I'm out of here versus I'm going to keep putting up with it? Because a lot of people, I don't think actually know where that line is for themselves.
So this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for people to do something. Like in business, you look at this every time. Is this going to be a win or is this going to be a loss? Live with the decision because you may not get the other opportunity to do it again. Mm-hmm. Okay, so look at Alberta, look what's there, look at the infrastructure that's there, look at the type of people we have, and make a question in your mind, can we make this work? In my mind, there's no doubt.
And on top of it, how exciting and how much fun is it going to be to have the opportunity to create a new country? You know, how often does somebody have that opportunity in their lifetime? It's a real opportunity. You know, for your kids, your grandkids, the future of, you know, the future of your home. You know, you get to completely redesign your home. Think of it as like, you know, a multi-billion-dollar renovation. It's awesome.
Well, you guys are definitely trailblazers, just so you know, leading the forefront. I'm officially inviting you back at some point when schedules line up to keep conversing.
Happy to.
We could talk for days on this stuff. But thank you guys for joining. We got to wrap it up. That is all. Thank you guys. If you have any questions, if you completely agree, disagree with anything we said, let us know. There's going to be a lot to talk about in the comments. We'll connect with you on the comments. Like, subscribe, you know, all the stuff everyone tells you to do while watching on YouTube. Thank you for hanging with us today. We'll catch you guys next time.